No se escucha.
Well, we cannot hear. Good morning.
Listo, gracias.
Ready, okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning to this 46th edition of the seminar, permanent seminar on welfare in the Americas on behalf of our president, Professor Zoe Robledo Burco, and the General Secretary, Professor Belarca. We welcome you to the seminar. We're very proud to have 46 sessions of this initiative that started 5 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. And we're very proud because of the topic we're having today, which is the presentation of the analysis and of the document of the homologated document on Social Security and integrated website of information of data that we have in the conference. That's the very summary of what we're going to do today. Welcome, everyone. Now I'm going to be with you as a moderator, but most of it, I want to introduce Professor Pablo de los Cobos Alcalá. He's the one who had this research. He's going to start, and then we'll follow up with comments from colleagues and friends from the conference. Professor Chris Nakutkatland, Dr. Edna Leticia Leonvite, and Frances Encarnacion Meles, the three people, collaborators of the ISCC, and they've always been here with us in this project. Well, this project we are introducing today was not just an idea out of a glimpse. It was not a researcher's work that said, I want to have information systems. If you take a look at the recommendations of the conference from the very first, from 1942, we instructed from the assembly to generate information systems. We also talked about population censuses because back then we didn't have, but we've talked about that ever since 1942. And the most detailed and recent version that we have, a declaration that talks about information systems, which is the Cancun Declaration in 2018, that talks about the integration of an integrated and homologated system of information on social security, not only censuses, but on specific information on social security and the institutions that are members derived from this. Here in the conference from the General Secretary, we've been working in the construction of these systems of information. You already are aware of them, of some. We've built some in such a way that we had to build an integrated system of data, which the communication area and information systems in the conference helped us to set them all in a single portal. So here we are proud to present the results of this initiative and on the attention of this recommendation and declaration from the conference through the members, through the assembly and the instruments that we have. I don't want to, take any longer. So we'd better start talking about our topic, and I'm going to give the floor to Professor Pablo de los Cobos Alcalá. He's a researcher here at the uh, conference. His research is centered on the adaptability of social security systems in emergency moments and the statistics to monitor access and results of the social security institutions. He has worked as an evaluator and data analyst of government and institutional programs nationally and internationally. He has a master's degree in administration and public policies from the CIDE, bachelor in law in the Ibero-American University in León, Mexico. So I'll give the floor to him. Professor Pablo de los Cobos, please go ahead. Thank you very much, Vanessa. Good morning. I'm very proud to present this initiative, which I will be heading, but there's a lot of people around in the communication area and communication systems and other research projects. I'm going to share my screen with you. Well, today we're going to talk about two initiatives. The first one is the Integral Portal of Data, and the second one is the Homologated System of Indicators of Social Security, which is particularly a part that makes part of this integrated portal of data, which is the initiative of data, the most recent one that we have launched from the CSS. So I'm going to talk to you about this portal. What are the initiatives that are made a part of this? Some of them are already public so that we will have a better idea of what information we have. And secondly, which would be the very first or the main part of this presentation, the homologated system of information of social security systems. And there are going to be three areas: government area, from the academia, also from an institution that is part of the ISCS, ISCC, and another person that has been working with us for a long time, and he'll give us the idea how these information systems are used in the context of Social Security. And then we have a Q&A session in the end. Well, I'll start with something that Vanessa has already stated, so that from different assemblies and we've said that we need information, and specifically in 2018, in the Cancun Declaration, we had a diagnosis that we needed to have better information, data, and evaluations that, on one side, would make the decision-making process easier when we have diagnosis on the existing situation, data, on the situation of several or certain populations, and so that it would also give an idea of the advancements in access of social security from the different institutions. So the specific proposal is to generate a platform that would have an integrated information system, on protection and social security. And from this initiative and request, we invited this information system generators to inform from there on, to talk about three great projects. The first was going to talk about general aspect of this is the Observatory of Social Security, which is a system of information focused on the condition of access to Social Security from groups that have been historically excluded of these rights and other rights. The second one is the Monitor of Social Security for the Americas, which is a platform of data that gathers and integrates indicators related to Social Security at a country level that produce other institutions but also are focused on Social Security matters. And finally, the third initiative is the CHISS, the Homologated System of Indicators of Social Security, which is a platform of data that is pretty similar to MOSA, but has the characteristic to produce information at an institution level on Social Security programs instead of doing it at a country level. Just a little comment: we're going to see in the presentation everything that you see in uh, bold letters is Spanish, and cursive letter is in English. Well, then let me tell you about the integrated portal of data and why it came to light. This initiative emerged a long time, and they've been developing increasingly. So we have the observatory focused on five population. We worked on one. We had this data portal, and a few years or months later, we had a platform for a new population, and same thing for the CISS and the MOSE. And those were initiatives that were parallelly running because they had the same objective, but they're in different parts of our websites and they had different structures. And we identified that they were pretty good initiatives, basically for the people that are not very familiarized with these systems and that have been in our different events, and they found it difficult to understand the information. And so from these, we suggested to integrate everything in a single site with the idea to make it simpler, the experience for the users of these sites. And this integrated was to integrate these portals in a single site that would have a structure and an homogeneous content. So we gathered the different parts of the conference in the area of information systems and communication and research to identify which kind of users were consulting this kind of information. And I will set an example. There are people that go to this platform because they are pretty interested in the research made by the CIS on uh, home workers, so they have a portal of data. So they're not maybe users that know about data analysis, but they get there because they want to know what the CIS work is. And there are some other people that do some consulting that generate statistics constantly on different topics for reports and research. And we see that it's kind of a user that goes to the data portal. So we saw the way to integrate in a better way on the side experience for these kind of users. And we generated a common structure, which we'll see later on, which presents the interactive portals of data so that when we have this the subsites, some sites of navigation, so, specifically for those that are not familiar as to PowerLink. But you know, the site tries to be friendly to users. There's an explanation to the initiative, and then we end up with other explanation and videos on these topics by the CIS. And another reason is that they would be in the official languages of the seas, English, Spanish, and Portuguese. These sites, these translations are validated by specialists. And we had the problem that the interactive data portal translation was not possible, so they had to be designed in these languages. So before we take a look at the portal, I want to talk to you about the three components of the portal, which is the observatory, the MOSA, and finally the CHIS. That will take me a little longer. The observatory comes from an idea that was backed up by the CISS and is within the different international dispositions on the social security is a human right, and it has to be guaranteed to any people or any person regardless their situation. So we see there are some groups that have some obstacles to have these human rights, and specifically we focus on five population: migrants, home workers, you know, tele workers, on application workers, app workers, and people with LGBTQ plus condition. And the idea of the portal is to generate information, gather this information where we see other sites, so that we'll see how much we see it as an obstacle. And in the case of a countries where there have been initiatives to incorporate this kind of populations, would have a better monitoring platform. So to see how effective these measurements have been and how much we've been able to close the gap uh, through the implementation of some policies. And the second one is MOSA, which is the Monitor of Social Security for the Americas. And that MOSA comes from the idea that there is already a set of indicators and other international organisms, repositories like the World Bank, CEPAL, OECD, etc. But many of these repositories, or all of them, are not focused on indicators related to Social Security. So we have to navigate in a set of navigators of different topics in order to get the information that we want in this regard. Before this situation, the proposal of the CIS was to take these indicators back, focus on some very strategical ones, either specific on social security or related areas, or set them in a data portal that should be focused on the countries that are part of the membership. And then they're integrated also the indicators of social security, some other demographic, socioeconomical, and health. And nowadays, we already have this data portal available, and we'll be generating the comparisons at a country level so that we'll understand at which level is a country in comparison to others regarding these indicators. Before telling you about the CIS, I'm going to show you the data portal. In the CIS portal, you'll see a tab on the portal. So we have the link that you see. And this is the way it looks, the integrated data portal. In the beginning, there's a little explanation on this initiative, and at different parts of the page, we'll see the three great sites, CHIPS, the Observatory, the CHIS, and the MOSA. We'll see the MOSA here. Here we see the data portal. We are going to be able to be aware of the five categories, see a specific indicator on social security, to choose a subcategory, which could be co-pensioners, and maybe we see a specific indicator, which is the percentage of people that get a salary. And this is the information that we have for the different countries in 22 years. And we have some graphs that are interactive. So if you uh, set the cursor, you'll have some charts and a little map that gives you a graph, a line graph to see the evolution in the time of a certain country. Then we have a description on what this initiative is about, where we get the information from, and the publications and videos about it. So this is the MOSA. And similarly, you'll see the other sides. In this case, we're going to see the observatory of the Unirva. Okay, there we are set to the five subside of the five populations that I talked to you about. So we have portal data from migrants already. And this side is the universalization of Social Security. Well, it takes a little time and is related to Social Security mechanisms for migrants, which can be unilateral or bilateral, which are mechanisms that are agreed between two countries, or multilateral between two or more countries. And you'll see which branches these mechanisms are about, which countries are subscribed, and then we'll see a series of information or additional information on the access on Social Security from migrants. And similarly, this is one of the data portals, the newest ones that we have in the CISS, is a data portal on home workers. We have information about 14 or 15 countries, if I'm not mistaken, when we'll see the percentage of the people divided by sex, which of these have access to Social Security. And this is pretty interesting because it was generated by CIS, because in many reports about that topic, generally we take the information that the actual countries give us, and there are different ways to conceptualize these home workers, and we try to homologate the criteria in order to define which is what a home worker is, and go to the national research either on income or work in order to generate all these kind of statistics. And here we have for some countries, we'll be updating information with new information emerging. And then here we can see the publications that we have on the seas and some events and infographics, so on and so forth. And something pretty similar happens to the other three sites. They do not have an interactive data portal yet, but they have some data, statistics, descriptive statistics on the access of on Social Security, and some events that we have held. The newest ones are LGBTI people. In June, we had a set of events to talk not only about Social Security, but also very focused on most of the events and understanding some challenges that LGBT people face when having access to Social Security. And the third initiative is the CHIS, that replies a little bit the structure of the previous portal. So I'll go back to the presentation, and I'm going to tell you specifically what the CHIS is, which is the portal that we're launching today together with the integrated portal. The CHIS is an interactive data platform that integrates statistics and indicators on Social Security at a country level. Sorry, at a program or institution level, specifically from the institutions that are members to the CISS. And this data portal, there is a set of documents that can be consulted on the indicator proposal and a diagnosis of what kind of information is being generated regarding Social Security at an institution level, and besides some documents that analyze the uh, gathered information on all these years. So CHIS is divided into two moments of time. One is the pilot stage, where we had a gathering of information that I will tell to you about later on, which is the information that we're launching today. And there's a second gathering information which is running now. And the idea is that this will become something which will be part of the institution. So today I'm going to talk about this pilot stage. And in the end, I'm going to make some comments on where we are going with the cheese. And why was this a pilot stage? Because it was the first time we were having this project, but it was also the first time an institution in the region was developing a similar initiative. There are some cases where we have information at a social security level, but there are some characteristics, and sometimes this information is not comparable. And besides that, it's not actually in a data portal, which is a very easy way to see. So that was the very first initiative in the region. So this is the pilot stage to see the response of the institutions, the design of the questionnaire, and identify if the information that we found was suitable or not. And in the pilot stage, we had different stages that could be divided into five parts. One is a diagnosis of the information that has been produced on Social Security, and there are some other stages that were linked between them, which is the gathering of information from the institutions and a proposal of indicators from this uh, research or questions that have been answered, and the gathering of the information from the institution and the systematization and analysis of the information to be published on the CHISA platform, which is the fifth stage where we are now. And the idea is that the process in the end would have some feedback, and so that we'll be able to follow up in the with this process in the coming years. So I'll first talk about the diagnosis and document from the CIS. We have one of the authors of the document, and in this document, from the suggestion of the developing of this information system, the first work was to identify which information was already existing on Social Security, so that we'll see how this information system would be working. So we reviewed the availability, the frequency, and the different variables on Social Security that were being generated by three kinds of institutions: international organizations, national offices of statistics from the different countries, and the actual Social Security institutions. And there were two findings that I will later helped us for the gathering of the information to establish the CHIS. So the most important is there's information, but it was not very, it was very heterogeneous, either because of the way it was being produced, the time it is being producing, and the variables that we have, and the actual characteristics of the institutions in every country. So maybe it would not be okay for every country to ask some questions, because not everywhere they have this kind of quotations or this kind of information or services. So this heterogeneity compared to the information and information system. And the second one is information, which is a little bit more comparable to the one that could come from uh, questioners. It was not so deep horizontally, that did not ask that much about many questions, many topics. They would only talk about the quotation or retirement plan, but they didn't ask about the different branches of Social Security. And it was not very vertically deep, because in most of the countries, the Social Security systems were not unified. They are fragmented. People have access to the Social Security to an institution according to certain working conditions. So there are many institutions that cover different services and different levels of services in different benefits. And so when we see the level of quotation in a country, we didn't know which specific institution they were actually referring to. And this is why it was not an information that would be so useful. So from there on, we had a recommendation to take advantage of the administrative registry, which is information that the actual institutions generate, because it was the greatest information on the different areas of branches of Social Security. But we had a process of homogenization to capture the same information between or among the different institutions, and then a systematization in order to produce this information. So from this design on and this diagnosis on, we designed the questionnaires that are going to be answered by the institutions with the actual information they generate. So this designing of questionnaires inspired in the OIT 102 covenant, which is a set of minimal service or benefits, which has been a paradigm in order to understand what Social Security is. So we had to have a common floor to know which branches to use and which are the variables that we want to get information from. So we asked about different areas, but specifically on the coverage of the benefits and the criteria of eligibility and the payment of the services of benefits are the how much they last and which part is contributing, either if they do it in order to have access to the benefits and the budget designated to that. Totally, there were 12 questionnaires, one general, which was information on coverage, on all the programs that would be offering from the institutions, and 11 specific questionnaires that would only respond as long as they were offering this service. The most evident plan was the housing and unemployment. Not all the institutions give these benefits, so they didn't have to answer these questionnaires. But if they offered some services on uh, elder old age pensions, so they would give us this information. It was 274 questions. They would only answer the questions that would apply to them, and then temporality of information was from 2015 to 2019. These related to the coverage on when we were talking about the number of people having access to the benefit, and when they were questions more like for the institution or some results, they were only on 2019. The minimum age of retirement, for example. So this is more like the characteristics. And we'll talk about the results, but that was the way we designed the questionnaires. And from the design of questionnaires, we had a document that can be consulted in the CHISS page, which is an indicator, proposal of indicators from these questionnaires. And these indicators, there are some generals and some other specifics on the branches of Social Security. In the case of the general ones, there you can break down into the kind of the branch of Social Security. In the general ones, we have a program that offers benefits due to elderly age. We may know and we want to know the coverage. So coverage is a general question applied to everyone, and we can break down specifically by branches of Social Security. And there are some other indicators that are only exclusively from a branch of Social Security, like medical assistance. We ask, or the indicator is the relationship between medical personnel. So this is an indicator that is exclusively for medical attention, or the minimum age to receive elderly age benefits, which is something which is related to elderly age. And there are 57 indicators built from the information given in the questionnaires. So when we had already designed the questionnaires and there was a proposal of indicators, we generated an invitation process to all the members to participate in CHIS. Totally, they were 18 institutions participating, localized in different countries, 13, and they're totally offering 160 programs. All of them were told about the project, and they also have they also had tables of work tables with institutions, so that we will explain how to fill in the questionnaire if there was any question about it. and we verified the information they were delivering was consistent. And if there was a question, we would be able to correct it before having the analysis. And from this information on and a calculation, we generated two products. One is the interactive portal of data, which I will introduce in a moment, and a second one, which is an analysis document of this information, which is the most recent publication, which can be also seen on the CISS website. And we have this document. It is divided into two sections. One is a very executive document where we introduce the main trends of the analysis of the information, about 20 pages or something, where the cheese comes from, what are the general data and the most important data for some branches of Social Security. And later on, you'll see specific analysis on the whole questionnaire and all the indicators, generally speaking and specifically speaking for the branches of Social Security. So just to set an example, is any of the areas that some of the countries discuss about the implementation or not of unemployment insurance, there is not so much systematized information about this. So we can have a first approach on what institutions are doing, what is their coverage, the eligibility, the replacement rate, and how much these programs last. And we can see or have an idea what is done in some other countries, or if some of these branches are being offered, it can be compared to the available information in other countries so that have a better criteria on where we are in a certain indicator as an institution. So this is the general scope of the sheet. Now I'm going to talk about to you about results that we had from this analysis. Well, so this is the page of the CISS page. At the beginning, you're going to have the portal data portal and then a description together with the releases and the videos on the regard. So this data portal is divided into two parts. One is a data portal at a program level on the left, where we present all the information that we have at a program level. So here we have the first things on coverage and the credit program of Infonavit in Mexico. For each and every one of these programs, we have a 5-year information program. And I'll explain this tab about the data portal, but would like to talk about this first, which is easier to understand. Then the information at a branch level adds all the program information and introduces a series of indicators, but grouping the branches of Social Security that we've been asking about. I'm going to tell you about some of the findings that we had about this. I'm going to make it a little bigger. I'm going to zoom it in. So this portal indeed replicates MOSA. So if at some point you have had, I saw a raised hand, but I don't know if it was, well, it replicates MOSA. So if you've already been to MOSA or a Power BI portal, it's basically the same thing. In these portals, we have to select sequentially the indicator. In this case, we only have two categories to be chosen. The first one is the subregion, and the second one, the indicator specific. And the categories of subregions are divided into general, which is the whole information for the whole regions, and then you can select to see information on a specific region. And then you choose a series of the indicators that we add up at a branch level. So this is the information of the sheets, which branches of Social Security are being offered on the part of the institutions participating in the exercise. And here I'd like to have a little note first, which is a program may offer two or more uh, Social Security branches. I'm going to have this elderly age pension program, and this program is offering this elderly age pension, but they also give access to health services. So let's say that this is a program called Elderly People Program. This is being offering two branches. So adding up these branches is not 160 number of programs. So the most offered branch is the health services, which is uh, common because in some countries informally that we have the access to social security. Indeed, what implies is access to health, even though it has some other benefits. What really matters here is access to health. The most common ones was where pensions due to elderly age or retirement or disability. Uh, those others subsidies for housing and protection for unemployment. Now let's see the coverage. So out of this, all the programs, we have some averages by branch of Social Security. There might be a certain trend. In this case of housing, there were less programs, and these programs had a greater amount of people being insured for these benefits. So the branch that would offer a greater number of average coverage, and this coverage was getting uh, bigger from 2015 to 2019. And on the other hand, the other ones that would have a less coverage were for accidents, work accidents, and accidents. So here we can see the average of contribution weeks needed to receive the benefits. So by the moment a person is registered in a program or starts to uh, be there, they do not necessarily have this benefit. In case we activate the situation, they would have to receive it. But sometimes we have to wait a series of, time of contribution to activate this part in order to receive it. The most common one then is of elderly people, and here we have to contribute a set of weeks or years in order to have a pension for elderly age. So this is to be expected to be the program which weeks of contribution with the most number. So here we have some other branches of Social Security compared to those that are asked the most in comparison to the ones that are asked the least. And in the case of access to health is the one that less weeks requires to have access to the service. In many cases, so in the game, the average was 7, you know, given the fact that some of them did not demand any kind of week. So the average was 7 weeks to have access to health services. One of the indicators to me that seems to be most interesting is the replacement rate. The replacement rate is once you pay the benefit, so those that are recurrent, the replacement rate is the average. This benefit corresponds regarding the total of the salary. So if a person makes 100 units of any currency and receives a benefit of 50, they would have a replacement rate of 50%. This is the average replacement rate among the different countries. So the maternity programs are the ones that have the highest rates in the programs that were responded, which is almost 100%. Now the average is 93%. In the second place, with a very high number, also is the accidents and work or professional diseases. And those that had the least replacement rates were elderly age and protection to unemployment, which is one of the newest ones, or maybe it's not so developed in the region. A little bit less, a little bit more, sorry. Now, one more of the areas that we asked about was the characteristics of administration of the program. So in here we have who is administering or managing the program, which is a public institution or private institution, or is it a mixed? administration, and if there is any kind of a contribution or not to have access to these programs. Well, in the case of the kind of administration, most of the programs are offered by institutions in the operation of the administration. 3 out of 4 programs were offered by any of these institutions. But something which was pretty interesting, this would vary on the breaking down on the kind of branch of social security. In the case of subsidies by disease, there's a great administration on the public administration, but it was less in some branches, and in some were more like private sector rather than the public sector, like in the housing sector, for example. So if we required any kind of contribution in order to have access to the contributions, we would see that half of programs were contributive, 26% were mixed, so they had access to people that would contribute, and some other components for people that were not actually being there. And, oh, and finally, for these type of branches, I would like to talk to you about information on the contribution to the programs. So in here we would ask, in the case of having some contribution to the programs, which part was the one that was having this contribution? It would be 3 parts, either the government, the employer, or maybe the worker. And we would also ask them which average or percentage of salary were they contributing about this. So, for example, for a pension for professional disease, for example, we would be contributing with a 5% of the salary on the worker, and the employer another 5%. So out of every program, we had all this information, and then later on, we had some calculation that rendered some interesting data. And say we have by our branches, but I'll talk about the general part, so that the ones that give the most contribution are workers, 63% of cases, because nevertheless they have a low average of their health. Those that contributed the least to these programs was the government, which would do it in a 32% of cases. Nevertheless, when they would contribute, they had the highest percentage, which was the 8.8% of the paid salary. And an intermediate part where the employers that would contribute in the 46% of the programs, and they would do it with a salary average of 8.6. This talks to us about the characteristics of design and financing, which is very disaggregated of the different programs of social security in the region. So this is information, generally speaking, here we can consult other kinds of indicators, and generally most of the information is in this second tab, which is information at a program level. So here is out of each and every one of the programs that have been shared by the institutions, we presented this information. I'm going to show you some of the information for branches of Social Security. I'm trying to make you see it all. So we have to select sequentially, taking a look at the numbers. First of all, we have to choose a category, which indicates the category may be the general indicators or specific indicators to each and every one of the branches of Social Security. And in a second time, we'll have to select one of the indicators. And finally, we can select, it's in English, it'll be in the language you have set up in your computer. And in the sub-region, we can filter the information, break down the information for one or more subregions. I'm going to show you all the information for all regions. So here we have the different branches of Social Security. And for example, let's go to the case of elderly age. So we select a category, and then we have to select one of the indicators, which indicates the one that is interesting to the minimum legal age for retirement to get the benefits for elderly age, and then we'll go the subregions. So here we have all the information. I'm going to zoom it in to have a better sight. So here we have all the information for each and every one of the programs, the aggregated between men and women. On the right side, a little map that says how many programs and institutions responded by country. So in the graph, when you see the cursor in on the graphs, you'll see the more specific information. In the case we do not show all the information because the name is too big, we can generally see that between the different programs there is not so much a big variation. Age goes from uh, what happens in other kind of indicators, and in the case of women in the programs it was 60.4 age 8 years of age, and in the case of men, it would be 61.7. So these are the averages. But if you want to have more specific information to see how many programs established 65, which is greater than 65 or less than 60, so here you'll have all the information. One more, which is pretty interesting, which is the maternity, and which are the benefits in case of being a mother or father. And here we have the maximum length of these benefits. We would see if it, and we would expect that there would be a greater part of response of on maternity, and less in the case of being a father. So, but we see an idea of how many institutions at least were offering both kind of benefits, which would be the maximum duration expressed in weeks that they have this kind of benefits. So in the case of women, it was 16.8 weeks, and for men were 15 weeks. Uh, Here we have 7 programs of paternity and 17 of maternity. So here we have some that are described in the analytic document. Here we have the information. There are some trends that seem to be interesting are related to a set of indicators, social demographic indicators that tell us that this information is reflecting at a certain point a trend in the region. So here we see the number of children that were receiving or that if they're in a daycare center or they're receiving some sort of uh, infant care. But in some of them that responded, there were some of the few branches that in time were less in the number of kids that were having access to this kind of services, which possibly can be related with a reduction of birth rate and these kinds of services, which gives us a lot of questions and measurements that would be taken in different institutions. And here we can be aware of the different performance of the programs like IMSS and Compensar, and some documents for other questions made for these. And in this case, it was only for coverage. And I would like to end up with health services. Health services is one of the areas or branches of Social Security that we ask the most and we develop indicators because it's one of the branches that we saw, which is the one that is offered the most in the region. And so I will show you some data. Generally speaking, we found it pretty interesting that this is one of the branches that every year is increasing in the coverage of people that have access to some sort of health services. It was an increase of 10%, more or less. I'm going to give you another indicator, but I'm going to talk to you about coverage, but it was sustained growth among the institutions. So a greater amount of people are being insured, which is great. But it's not only growing the number of people having access to this benefit, but also the set of personnel in different areas and equipment and infrastructure that is required to give or render better health service to people. So we see it has been increasing the number of personnel, and we're also increasing all kinds of professions. uh, nursing personnel is increasing the most. And also we have a better infrastructure from the different places. We have more X-ray equipments, ultrasound. So we didn't have a great number of hospitals, but at least we have more equipment in the hospitals. And in here, and I'm going to introduce to you to one of the indicators. We are having a greater number of consultations every year, but there were two particularly that have the greatest percentage variations. One is physical medicine and rehabilitation. So you'll see how much we've been increasing this kind of consultations. And the second one that seemed to be pretty interesting that was increasing and is being implemented on a yearly basis in every more institutions every time, which is the consultation in the home of the people. So these two kinds of consultations are having an increase. You know, all sorts of consultations are growing. This is something which is growing not so fast. Um, and lastly, I told you that it was the previous one was going to be the last one, but this seems to be too interesting to me, so I want to mention this to you. Unemployment rates. I told you that not all the countries have these kind of programs or benefits. So at least here, these are not all the programs that we have in the region, but those are the ones that answered. We can be aware of series of indicators, and here we have the list. The maximum duration of the benefits for unemployment, the coverage, and how many people request this out of the total number of people that request this, which is the acceptation rate, how many weeks we require to contribute or start receiving these benefits with the replacement rate. So this is the maximum duration of the unemployment benefits. So we see a temporality of a year long for Chile, for example. And so in the case of Uruguay, it was 24, which is a little less than half a year. And so on for the different kinds of programs. We can see in the implementation the way these programs are operating, which are pretty good in the region. So I will ask the presentation of the portal, uh, telling you to have a look at it. There is more information than what I just presented to you. So here we have the most strategic information about the indicators that we were generating, and mainly the description of the questionnaires and the questions. So it's written in the analytic document, and there you can gather additional information in case you don't find it in the portal. So I'll be back to the presentation, encouraging you to take a look at the CHISS and integrated data portal. I'm going to end up by telling you where we got with this initiative. So as I told you before, she's at a pilot stage. We are launching the product. We can take a look at the information already. And now what we want to do is to keep on with this project. So we're doing it because we were asked at the moment of filling in the questionnaires to redesign itself with two ideas to reduce the number of questions without compromising the comparability, to facilitate or uh, shorten the time of filling in the questionnaire so that most institution would participate. And the second one is to adequate questions to different contexts and institutions. So, few months ago, we had work tables, which are called subsidies by function. So for each and every one of the questions, there are many particularities. So for in the case of budgeting, I don't know if, you know, some institutional private institutions, um, so we had to adequate this kind of questions too. So we are redesigning this so that it would be more suitable. And this is why we have work tables, which where all the subregions are participating, or almost all of them. So would say we didn't invite all the institutions because they were not going to be uh, work tables. But if there is somebody here from the institutions, members that want to participate in the design, we would be glad to have you in the work table with you. And once we finish this, well, then we'll be working with all the institutions and with love to have your participation to nourish this initiative in a better way. And the purpose of all this, is to have a greater participation from the institutions. We would love that all members that are offering this kind of services would participate and do it subsequently. And the second one is that this process would be institutionalized in two ideas in the publication and the gathering so that we would be able to gather or have some uh, processes and information. And the second one was so that you'll be aware how often you would be able to see this information. Maybe this information is already outdated because it is from 2019 and many things changed after the pandemic. And so with this new update, we have 2023, but the idea is to have it uh, every year in and year out. So that would be everything I would have to say, and then I'll give the floor to our moderator. Thank you very much, Pablo. And I'm going to please ask you to give a round of applause to him, please. Well, thank you very much, Pablo, for your clear explanation on all the work that we've been performing in the conference. I just want to reinforce my thankfulness for the area of communication led by Fabio Bautista and also Luis Hernandez that is around there. Thanks to them, for their support, for the integrated data portal and the area of system that helps us with the Power VI and this information visualization. Thank you also, Dr. Noel Rizzo, who's working with the MOSA, and of course, Miguel and his team, which are the ones that are working with the observatory. You know, MOSA and observatory as well are constantly being updated. I invite you to see the page constantly. We'll be updating the MOSA data soon. We do it on a yearly basis because otherwise we wouldn't be able to finish it. Never. So on the observatory is constantly having new information. Keep in mind that these data are processed from information that we gather from uh, pumps. So we have to work with all this data, and this sequence of work of the information systems is pretty interesting. We'll be talking about this later on in some workshops. Maybe the information first that we already have, and then display and information processing to have a greater detail. And basically, what we do in the observatory, what Pablo did in the CHIS, and the information analysis that we also have products. Uh, well, I'm getting lost again. Now, let me tell you that maybe it's a little later, but it's never late. You can hear to these in other languages. And then I'll also tell you that all these people that want to participate that have given us some comments, we thank you very much. Use the uh, question and answer box in the end. We'll answer them. Now, I'm going to give the floor to our friend, colleague, and ex-collaborator, Professor Krishna Kushkatla Mendez, who is here with us from, online, and he's going to talk to us about this project that he has been working with this. He is a specialized researcher for social policies. He has experience in qualitative and quantitative methods to implement and design complex research projects. Nowadays, he works as a consultant in the Research Center of Innocenti from UNICEF, analyzing family policies in Europe. Before that, he worked in the Inter American Conference on Social Security, where he design research projects in the Americas, and particularly the one that we are dealing with now. Krishna has a master's degree by the Colegio de la Frontera Norte in Mexico, and now in political sciences in London University. Thank you very much, Krishna. I'll give you the floor now. Hello, Vanessa. Thank you very much. Pablo, congratulations. Thank you very much for your presentation. Great one. I sincerely thank the invite for this presentation. It's a project that everyone in the conference like a lot. And definitely, CISS has shown this consistent compromise with the generation of statistics on social security. And I believe this data, integrated portal data, in this first stage of the homologated system of indicator of social security can tell us about it. I was reflecting on the importance of this project for CISS and having this. And there are many factors, but I want to mention three key factors why I consider this project will be very helpful in the production and spreading of this kind of information. First one is innovation and regional comparability. Of course, there are data portals like ILO on the social protection or the mutual system of social security or social protection for the European Union. Nevertheless, besides that, there are no specialized platforms that would offer comparable information between American continent countries first, and then secondly, that would have a comparative analysis at an institutional level within the region. So the second factor I consider is this value for decision making and the availability of data at an institution level is important for informed decision making and the production of governance models. This facilitates the enhancement of the benefits and better coverage for beneficiaries. A last element that I consider crucial is support on the comparative research. Having institutional data that can be compared allows us to have this kind of research between institutions to understand, for example, which why entities with certain similar budgets have different coverages. This information can be linked with the demographic context, health, social changes, which is paramount to start discussing the amendments or changes in the social security systems in our countries. It is also crucial that institutions may adapt to the new social risks, but it is also important to address the historical compromises on social security. For example, in the first meetings before the creation of the conference more than 80 years ago, maybe the first or second meeting, they were already discussing how important it was to include the indigenous and rural populations in Social Security. By then, ILO financed a study in Peru to go forward with this project. Nevertheless, even though these ideas influence certain agendas, today we do not know, we are not aware about disaggregated information on how many indigenous peoples are beneficiaries or contributors in these services of Social Security. And I understand that maybe I'm asking too much. We have the breaking down by sex or age, maybe, but I want to talk about the importance of being able to measure the results at an institution level and why is it so crucial to design inclusive programs, to design institutions that are responsive and can adapt to the needs of the populations in our country. And of course, this, just like I had the chance to participate in the first stage of this project, and it had some challenges that are common or are that are not uncommon to any kind of project of this nature, where we need to speed up the regulative or the regulation framework, to have institutions with regulation frameworks that would encourage the regulation and spreading an analysis of the production of information of every institution. And by the same token, it is also important to have financial and technical elements, which definitely sometimes, sorry for being so brave to say this, institutions have other priorities on the budgeting, and prioritization of statistic generation is not something which is urgent. And many times the institution perspective may push or influence the production of statistics within the institution, and the perspective of leaders of the institutions may also, if there is not an institution willingness, the production of information or the advancement on this kind of projects is not going, it's going to go very slow. So with this, I want to reflect a little bit on which this kind of challenges demand not only the active commitment from the conference to boost this agenda for the production of the information, or generating information, gathering the information, harmonizing it in order to publish it, but also the active participation of institutions, as well as some other factors that are important that may help us in the design and implementation of these kind of projects. Yesterday, yeah, it was yesterday, in the World Forum of Data of United Nations, we launched a campaign about the commitment to data, which is called Commitment to Data, Transforming Dialoguing Information and Action and Impact. So I believe that this project by the conference, the integrated portal of data and the homologated system of indicator of social security, may take the same path to evolve towards the building of an international agenda backed by CISS and the institutions to develop data portals which are strong, dynamic, that may facilitate, among other things, research, but that may also facilitate the impact in the life of beneficiaries or people in general. This portal shall give us comparable information from the member institutions and shall be used to generate action and impact, allowing the institutions to be adapted and to become more inclusive in the answer to the needs of the populations in our continent. I considered it's a great challenge for CISS and social security institutions to transform information into effective tools for the continuous enhancement of constant change. And I want to close this participation by thanking and celebrating these kind of projects like the SHES and integrated data portal represent an important advancement the way we understand social security in the Americas. conference has led this initiative is not only establishing a standard of excellence in the gathering analysis of data, but also is setting the basis for the future so that the policies of social security may be more effective, inclusive, and adaptable to the ever changing realities of our society. I hope the continuous development of this project, definitely, I believe the effort of different sectors, institutions, conference, and the work of all of us, we may make a real big difference in the life of millions of people that live in our continent. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Krishna, for your words and the observations and the challenges that you set forth. Yeah, yeah, we have a great commitment and we'll try to comply with it. Now, next, we're going to ask another great collaborator from the conference to give us a few words, comments on this project that we're introducing today. She's Dr. Elda Leticia Leon Vite. She is a researcher, professor on the business economy on the University Caribe in Cancun, Quintana Roo, Mexico. She's the director of, you know, she has a specialty in business administration. She belongs to CONACYT and the state system of researchers. She has a degree from San Agustin University. Uh, so by the same token, also has a, uh, she has been awarded for her participation in the fiscal in the Caribbean. And she has given courses and conferences in different uh, higher education institutions, nationally and internationally. Uh, she's been specializing in financial accounting, emphasizing social security. The nine of you know, consolidated in economy and society of the Caribbean University is competitiveness and the fiscal with companies emphasizing social security. Welcome, dear doctor. Thank you very much for being here with us. We'll give you now the floor.
Buenos días.
Good
Muchas
morning.
gracias y
First of all, I
agradecimiento
want to
a usted por la
thank
universidad
sincerely to
y
you,
a
Dr.
Profesor Pablo por
Vanez
invitarme a
and Professor
participar en
Pablo, for
este
inviting me
evento.
to participate in this
También
event.
felicito
And
a
also, I
los
want to
profesionales encargados de
congratulate
los portales
professionals
del
in charge
manejo de
of the
indicadores y de
portals
datos
of the
de
management
la
of
Conferencia
indicators or
Interamericana de
data
Seguridad
on the
Social,
conference in
que es el doctor
Inter-American
Noé
Conference
Rizo
of Social Security,
Moza
Dr.
y el
Noé
maestro
Rizzo
Pablo en el
Moza and
CISS.
Professor Pablo in the CISS.
Bueno,
Well, first,
delego
I will
inicio mi
allow myself to start
participación
my participation
comentando que una de las
by telling you
funciones
that one of
principales
the
de
main
las universidades,
roles within the
además de la
universities,
docencia y de
besides
la
teaching,
investigación.
is research.
En los centros de
In
investigación
the research
existen las
centers,
líneas de
there
generación y
are
aplicación del
uh,
conocimiento.
knowledge
Justamente
lines of
para generar
application
dicho
of knowledge.
conocimiento en las
In
nuevas
order to
generaciones de
generate such
estudiantes que van a ser los
knowledge
futuros
in the new
profesionistas
generations
de
of
cada uno de nuestros
students that are
países.
going to be future
Y por
professionals in
ello
our
se
countries. And
pretende
with
que ese
that, we
conocimiento lo
want
apliquen
that
en su vida
knowledge to be
profesional
applied
y
in the
laboral.
professional and
Me quiero permitir
work
comentar
life. I
que
want
la
to
manera en la
say
que he
that the
usado
way
dentro
I
de mi
have
práctica
used within
profesional,
my
académica y de
professional
investigación los
practice
portales de datos que
the
acertadamente
data
pone la
portals
Conferencia
that
Interamericana de Seguridad
the
Social,
Inter-American Conference
pues habla
has
de recopilar,
was to
analizar
gather
información
and
conjuntamente
analyze
con los estudiantes de las
information together with
carreras
students of
que
the
se ofertan aquí en mi universidad, tanto de
degrees
negocios
offered in
internacionales
university,
como de
international
innovación empresarial.
businesses such as
Eh,
enterprise
Creo que
innovation.
es
And
importante
why is
destacar
it
que uno de los
important to say that
este,
one of the
de
profiles
lograr en
that
estos
we
momentos
want to
es
have
que
in
sean
students is so
generadores
that
de
they would
empleos,
be uh,
por lo que es de suma
job
importancia
generators,
que conozcan
because
el
then it is
estado que
very
guarda la
important to
seguridad social
be aware of
en nuestro
social
país y a
security,
nivel
you know,
internacional.
in our country and internationally
Eh,
speaking.
entonces, recordemos
Then let's
que si existe
remember that
conocimiento
if there is
sobre la seguridad
knowledge
social
about
en
social
nuestros
security
aspirantes futuros
in our
profesionistas,
future
estamos garantizando una
professionals, we
buena
are
aplicación de la protección social,
warranting a good
ya
application
que la
of
falta de
social
protección
protection
social
because the lack of social
tanto en nuestro
protection,
país como en otros
both in our
países,
country and
sabemos que
other
está asociada
countries,
a la
we
falta de
know is
información muchas
linked to the
veces.
lack of information many times.
Cuando los
When
estudiantes, futuros
students,
profesionistas,
future
conocen
professionals
sus
are
deberes
aware
y
of their
derechos, tanto como
rights and
empresarios,
obligations
como
as
trabajadores, y los
entrepreneurs and
derechos y deberes
workers
de sus
and the
familias,
rights and
es
obligations of
cuando
their
más
families
comprenden
is when
el
they understand the
alcance y la
most
magnitud de
how
la protección
important
social.
social
Entonces,
protection is.
la falta
So
de protección social
the lack
está
of
asociada
social
a
protection
la
is
falta de
linked
información,
to the lack of
por lo que es
information. So
muy
it
importante
is
que los
paramount
estudiantes, futuros
students
empresarios
and
sepan sobre
future
cobertura,
businessmen are aware of
eligibilidad,
coverage,
los
eligibility
pagos de
criteria,
beneficios,
payments of
la
benefits,
duración de todas estas
the
prestaciones,
duration
las
of all these
fluctuaciones
benefits, the
y cómo
contributions, and
es el manejo
how
presupuestal que se
the
tiene en las instituciones
budgeting
y
management in the
cómo es que
institution
están
is,
manejando
and the
el
way
presupuesto
they are
justamente
managing
para hacer sostenibles
uh,
eh,
budget in order
en
to
el
make
tiempo las
all these
aportaciones.
contributions
También es importante
sustainable
considerar
in time.
y dar a
It is
conocer
also
que las
important to
acciones que ustedes
let people know
realicen
that the
en cada
actions
una de sus
performed by you and
instituciones
each and every one of your
sirven para mejorar
institutions
los programas
helps
académicos,
us to enhance
los
the
programas de
academia
asignatura
programs,
que nosotros
the programs of
impartimos en la
uh,
docencia, con la finalidad de que
subjects that we
egresen
give when we
profesionistas más
teach, so
capacitados,
that we
con
would have
habilidades en
more
materia de
trained
seguridad social.
professionals with abilities
Todos
regarding
los
social
proyectos
security
que se
matters.
realizan en
All
las
the projects
universidades es para que
developed in the
sean de aplicación
universities
directa y en
is
beneficio de la
in order to
ciudadanía.
be directly
Entonces es de
applied for the
suma
benefit of
importancia
the
todo lo
citizens.
que ustedes
So
hacen a
it's
nivel
all
institucional.
you do at an
No hay
institutional
otra
level
manera
is
de cómo
paramount.
nosotros
And there is no
implementemos
other way
buenas
how
prácticas
we in
si no
academia be aware
están
of this if
indicadores y
we
datos
didn't have
abiertos al
indicators and
público
open data for the public.
y que los centros de
And
investigación
that
podamos
research
echar
centers
mano
would
de
be
ellos.
able to,
En
use
cuanto
them.
a investigación
As
de
for
los proyectos que se vienen
research of the projects
desarrollando
that
en mi
have been
universidad,
developed in my
uno de los
university,
que más
one
destacan
of those that are
en
the
seguridad
most
social,
important ones regarding
pues
social
es el que habla
security
sobre los impactos
is the one that
sociales
talks about social
que se han
impacts
tenido en el mercado
that
laboral
we
de la
have
seguridad
had
social en México.
in the work
Los años que
market
se
and
han
social
venido
security in
estudiando
Mexico.
son a partir de
Years that
2019.
have been studied
Su
are
referente
coming
fue el
from
monitor
2019.
de seguridad social para
Their reference
América.
was the Monitor of
Sin
Social
embargo,
Security for the
esta
Americas.
es una investigación de
Nevertheless, this
corte
is a
longitudinal,
longitudinal kind
por
of
lo que se pretende hacer
research.
uso del
So we
portal
want
del
to
CISS
use the CISS portal
precisamente para generar
actually to
información
generate
no solo
information
apegada a
not
organismos
only
internacionales,
linked
también apegados
to
a
international
las instituciones,
organizations, but also
para generar
considering
indicadores de manera
institutions
más
to
particular
generate
a
more
nivel
particularly
institucional,
generators at an
siendo el
institution level,
propósito el destacar
being the
las áreas de
purpose
oportunidad
to
para
highlight the areas
mejorar la
of
seguridad
opportunity
social de las
to enhance
personas en
social
condiciones
security of people
vulnerables.
in
¿Qué
vulnerable conditions.
acciones están
What actions
ejecutando
are
en
being
otras
executed
instituciones
in
que
other
puedan mejorar las
institutions
condiciones de la
that may
ciudadanía?
enhance the
Y también
conditions of
las
the
acciones que
citizens, and
regulen
also the actions
o que requieran de
regulating
una
or that would
reingeniería
require a
de
re-engineering
estos de estas
of
áreas de oportunidad.
these areas of opportunity.
También es cierto
It is
que
also
la
true
investigación debe de ser
that
aplicada.
research has to be
Debe de
applied.
crearse un círculo
We
virtuoso
have to
en
create a
beneficio del sector
virtuous
académico, del
circle
sector empresarial
for the
y del
benefit of
sector
the
gubernamental.
private,
Tenemos
academia, and
que
government sectors.
estar
We
conjuntamente
have to be
trabajando pues
working
en beneficio
together for the
de la
benefit
ciudadanía y de
of
la
the
población
citizens
que está en
and the
condiciones de
population
vulnerabilidad.
which is in conditions of vulnerability.
Como les comento,
As
pues
I
estos son
tell
solo un par
you,
de ejemplos en los
this
cuales
is only
podemos
a
hacer
couple
uso
of
de la CISS.
examples where we can use
¿Por qué?
CISS.
Porque
Why?
tanto en la docencia
Because
como en la
in teaching
investigación,
as well as in
estos
research,
indicadores pueden
these
ser de
indicators
una
may
magnífica
be
utilidad.
of great use.
Les quiero
I
nuevamente
want
agradecer
to
la
once again
invitación
thank
y
you for the
espero haber
invitation,
sido
and I
concreta y
hope I
puntual
have been
en el por qué es tan importante
clear
para nosotros
on why is it so
este
important
sistema
to us,
homologado de
this
indicadores de
homologated
seguridad
system of
social.
social
Muchas gracias,
security
muy amables.
indicators. So, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Elda, for enlightening us on other uses of this kind of information and also giving us hope that our work is useful to you all. Now, we're going to give the floor to a great colleague of us and a collaborator from the conference. She's Francis Encarnacion Valdez. She's in charge of actuary services in the public Dominican Republic. He plans and formulates projects in the social security scope. He helped with the elaboration of social security systems. He has a master degree on financial administration. Welcome, dear Francis. So I'll give you the floor. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be part of this development. As you know, as the rest of the people said, this platform is another bridge to homologate different indicators. This allowed us to focus and pair, to make these indicators that were helpful to see the impact of the incorporation of different topics for the satisfaction of Social Security. As my previous colleague said, in Latin American countries, we see many indicators that are related to benefits, subsidized benefits, and most allows us to see how these indicators work with the implementation of financing implementation, either public or private. Somoza also allowed us to see other indicators, but that are not necessarily included in Social Security, which interact and give response, the widening of coverage and widening and inclusion of other modes of services. As previously said, unemployment insurance or the topic of the percentages of affiliation that you may compare them by any kind of mode of affiliation included, not only focused on complying with all requirements with the ILO agreements. That is to say, MOS allows us to see the statistics of the different benefits of services included in the ILO, because I understand with the incorporation of new platforms and the launching of these new uh, tool will have an idea to all these informations and questionnaires that we give the CISS and other entities. That's where we'll see the answer. When we'll be able to consolidate that platform, we're going to be able to have a response to why having all these questionnaires. This is going to be the result. When we in the Dominican Republic, we were able to incorporate MOSA to a local platform. And this also allows us to see the reason why many of our indicators and why we have to gather all that information from the local institutions in order to give an answer to international requirements. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Francis, for your words and your clear message. And now it's time for us for the Q&A session according to our work agenda. I remind you that in order to ask questions or any comment that you may want to be heard here, please do it through the lower part called preguntas y respuestas. We cannot open the mic to all people, but there's this possibility for you to be heard. And while we have these questions, I would like to give the floor to Pablo if he happens to have an answer for the colleagues that gave comments on his work. Thank you very much. Well, I would first like to start with the comment that the links participations, which is the effort made by the Social Security institutions. You know, it's true that it's information that you already have. In the end, it requires a process. You know, sometimes you have that information, but there are local informations that we have to coordinate with in order to really do it. So we really thank the institutions that participated and with love to continue collaborating with them and many others that would add up to this initiative. And the second comment has to do with something that we were talking about the use of that information, which was one of the reasons why we invited the people that are here with us. Because they can tell us about the use of the information in different contexts, either from the government part, academia part, or international organization part. Well, so that in some of the information tables, you says that maybe for sure you had this forum of United Nations. They have to respond to concrete needs of those that are going to be consulting the information and those products that have been generated so that they would be useful for a lot of people. So thank you very much for your participations. So if you wish, I may start with one of the questions that we've been receiving. The first is from Leticia Martinez, and she asks, it would be important to have a classification where the state is the only source of financing. Where is the worker? Where is the employee? Um, yeah, in the data portal, most of it in the section of branches. You'll see this information by branches, and like it happens with the 12 number, the average which they contribute with is more than 100% with sometimes, because sometimes it may contribute two or three parts, but in the document, this that is going to be available in the CISS page, you may be able to see in the final part how each and every one of these programs responded to this question. So you'll see a little Excel spreadsheet chart where you'll have the name of the program in the first column, and then we'll have three more columns where we have whether if the worker contributes, the government, or the employer. And in there we have the average that we'll have when it comes. You can see it very specifically, or the relation to, or the answer to this question, when it's only one of a parts, when it's two or three parts, and what is the percentage that they are participating with. Okay. If there is somebody, panel members that would like to say something, we'd love to hear it. But these are a little bit more specific about the port. I will read the second question by Celia Navarro. It says, if Social Security is a human right, who has to, the one who has to warranty it is the state. Would it be feasible to cover all these and let the enhancements to a category of private contributions? It would help to widen the coverage. And we can have a great debate on this. There have been several sessions here at CISS on this specific question. I'll give you my opinion, and maybe we can give further information later, and maybe we would love to hear the participation of the other panelists. Yeah, since it is a human right, the one who is uh, obligated to warranty is the government, but we cannot just say, well, given the fact that it's a private administration, the government, so it doesn't imply that for the administration or surrendering of these social security, well, the main responsible is the government, of course. But for the mechanisms, we can have a mixed participation. Now I'm going to read recommendation 202 from ILO, which is one of the questions in the questionnaires, where we said, oh, it's a human right, and we have different social security institutions, and then we have something like the social protection systems and other kind of institutions that see topics related to education. The ideal thing it would be that there would be an articulation between these different systems so that we'll really be able to guarantee the human right to social security so that giving you a concrete answer is that the responsible is the government, but it's not the only one. And in general, in many of our countries, there is some uh, working together between the public and private sector. But of course, the responsible one is the government. So if somebody would like to say something, or shall I read the next question? Yeah, it's something which is under discussion, and you will always have your own idea. Maybe somebody here in the room would like to say something. No, okay, let's move on. Alone, I will read the next question from Jorge Luis Flores Rosas that says, well, there is a part where you will see the information on their work competence, etc. Now, of course, all this information we would have liked to gather, but many variables were not included. First of all, because maybe many of the institutions didn't have all this information, so it was a little bit complicated to have all this information. And the second one is because most of the information is focused on the benefit rather than in the capabilities in order to have this benefit. Nevertheless, and most of, in the case of health services, is not this uh, degrees or many, you know, we have specialized personnel in different areas. In there, you can have the amount of medical doctors, psychologists, etc. A series of sub kinds of specialization, without having that kind of information. And this is why the reason we didn't get that information, but we can have that additional information. The second one by Jorge Luis Flores Rosas. Is there a way to see all this information by subregion or states in the country? In the case of the MOSA, no. In the case of CISS, no, due to the design, because C is actually has a degree of the aggregation may vary due to the structure of decentralization of every country, but the information is for each and every one of the institutions. Generally speaking, they're institutions of national character, so they have coverage in most of the country. Only in some cases, but we didn't have answers. There are some local institutions. I know that in the case of Mexico, I don't know if in the case of other countries, which are, from Colombia, it's, very few institutions that we have. In some point, there are institutions that we're going to, in fact, given the fact that they have a regional component, it's the institution of workers of government of Guanajuato, which is an entity in Mexico, and it's part of a CISS. So that institution gives Social Security in Guanajuato only. So if we had the information for that institution, we would be able to have an idea of what happens in Guanajuato regionally. But given the fact that it's, I don't know if the MOSA in the future will have this information, and it would be great to generate it. So in the case of people that work in homes, in the case of no, Nick, I don't know which one was used for Mexico. It has a state representation, so we can have the calculations for Mexico at a state level. But I understand that not all the research have regional representativity, but we can see in the case of the members of Guanajuato, it's only for the workers, the public workers, workers at the service of the state. So it's already grouped different. You'll not have all the information. So as you said, is we want to have it by institution, regardless of the geographical coverage. I'll read a question from Marcela Rodriguez. The intervention from Professor Krishna is paramount for the Caribbean. Uh, if you allow to have an inclusive generation of information, there are advancements in this part, groups of work, or what kind of strategies may be developed. And here Krishna had a commitment. I don't know if Krishna is still there. Well, I'll give you an answer to this. I believe that actually Moza, and particularly she's, want to. Perfect, perfect. I believe these initiatives try to address the generation of specific information for our region. In the case of Mosa, there are several indicators that are actually specific only for countries in the region, and in some cases have certain characteristics due to the way this social security system has been developed. So let's say that these initiatives come from this. And in the case of she's, I believe one of the things which is paramount and interesting and is disaggregated from the information is that in several Latin American countries, we have had a very fragmented system, as I previously said. And so maybe in some other countries that have had a greater development, let's say a more universal development of social security, this fragmentation topic is not that information, and generating this kind of information wouldn't be that relevant because it is linked to a single institution, or maybe they're integrated among themselves and they give very homogeneous information. So, so in the Latin America countries and the Caribbean countries has not been the case. You know, mm, so it requires a greater relevance, at an institution or program level. So I believe later on we'll be able to know if there's something about this. We have a question here in the room. I'll read the other questions later on, and we'll give the floor to Vero.
Ya, listo, gracias. Gracias, Pablo. En
Thank
principio,
you,
muchas
Pablo. Well,
felicitaciones por este
first of all,
proyecto y a todo el equipo. Es
congratulations
un
for the
esfuerzo
project.
enorme ver
It's been a
esta
great
generación de
effort
información y además
to see this
generación de información, ¿no?
information and
Así que muchas
generation of
felicidades,
information. So,
un gran esfuerzo.
congratulations, a
Y
great
bueno, tengo
effort.
por aquí dos
And I
preguntas.
have a couple of
Justo con tu
questions.
presentación
With your
veía este tema
presentation,
de cómo se
they
está
see this topic
mostrando la
of how
información,
we are
¿no? A
showing the
manera de mapas
information
precisamente y también a manera de programas.
by branches
Entonces,
and
en ese
programs.
sentido,
So in that
quiero saber
sense,
qué tan
I
viable
want to
es
know how
la
feasible
generación
it
de esta
would be, or if we
información
already have that
segregada,
information
por ejemplo,
uh,
por sexo, ¿no?
broken
A
down by
nivel de
sex, for
ramas,
example,
si se
at a
podría
branch
revisar
level.
en
If
este
we can
momento o es parte de
take a
esta
look at
segunda
it now,
fase
or it's part
que
of
se
the
está
second
recopilando la
phase that
información directamente con
we're
las instituciones.
gathering the information
Vaya,
together with the
como pregunto por
institutions.
sexo porque
And then
pues es
I
como
ask for
la información
sex
más básica,
because
¿no?
that's the
Que
most
justo ayer lo
basic
comentaba por
information,
ahí
which
Krishna, que fue
actually
un gusto
Krishna was
verlo
talking to us
a
about, which
distancia.
was a
Vaya,
great
en
pleasure
el
to
cual,
see
bueno,
him in the
comenzando
distance,
desde lo más básico y después
when beginning
haciéndolo
from
mucho
the
más
very
complejo con
basic
información, por
and then
ejemplo,
making it
a
much more
pertenencias a
complex,
grupos indígenas, por ejemplo, ¿no?
by groups
Y
or
otra pregunta es, bueno, ¿qué tan
ethnicities.
viable
And
sería
another
que la
question is how
información
feasible
que
it
está
would be to
mostrando
be
esta
that the
plataforma
information shown by
nos
the
permita
platform
hablar
would allow
a
us to
nivel de
talk
región? Es
at a
decir,
region level. That
entiendo
is
que
to
lo que
say,
está
I understand
recopilando
that
es
what
información
it
directamente
has
de las
been
instituciones
gathered is
que son
information
parte de
from
la
the
membresía del
institutions that
CISS,
are
que vaya
members
que la
of the CISS.
membresía es
That
bastante amplia, pero
we have
entonces,
a
¿qué se
big membership,
requeriría
but
para que
what would
entonces
we
podamos hablar
need so
que
that we'll be
esta
able to say
plataforma
that
nos
this
muestra un
platform
panorama más a
shows
nivel regional?
us a more regional
Esas son.
pan
Gracias.
or scope? Thank you very much for the questions. Well, about the first, not for all the indicators, but there are some that have broken information, broken down. Some of them historically have differentiated access uh, by sex, like for example, retirement age. In this, we have information broken down by gender. So one of the important things that we saw is the different tickets aggregations by sex, most of it. So from some variables, we do not have it, but it's not something which is general in the sheets. Due to a topic of, for extension of the questionnaire. So we only had some questions so that we were pretty interested in having this degree of disaggregation. We asked specifically information about indigenous people, Afro descendants, and disabled people. And in the work tables, they told us to include LGBT people, and unfortunately, there was a very little information about them. The one that we had the most were indigenous people information. Only seven disaggregated information by indigenous people, and maybe only one for people with disability or no one with LGBT people. But that's a question that we want to keep. It was there in the table works, and we have to invite the institutions to generate that information at a gender level. We can actually take a look at it and include that variable. And in the case of the regional information, I think that here is the topic that that information is not only representative, it is neither representative of the membership nor the region, because in the end, not all the institutions participated, only the ones that were interested in doing it. And besides that, I believe it's something great, but it also gives us some other topics.
So there's a great diversity of programs. We have specific programs for a population, for example, armed forces in a country of 15 millions of inhabitants. And we have a great institution of a country of 130. We are comparing it in an homologated way, but sometimes it's difficult to generalize from that information. And we worked in the document by understanding which kind of institutions are responding the questionnaire and each and every one of the questions, and from there on maybe have a better idea of what kind of uh, say or what kind of things to say in the regional situation. And in the second phase, we would like to have a greater side and say, well, in this region, we have these characteristics, so on and so forth. And very informally, we have tables of work with the sub-regions, but we would say that the sub-region of North America and the Caribbean Anglo have a very different way to generate information from the other ones. Many questions, they already have them. So that they would ask us, why don't you ask us more? Maybe we have more information. And there are some other places that would say, wait, we didn't have that information. Um, well, well, there are some particular points from the regions. And in the second phase, we would like to do it with greater detail. Now, the portal now allows you to see by region. If you used to add up, if you wanted to know about a characterization of a complete region of America, we still do not have an answer. We know it's not a homogeneous, and maybe is what we have to have in the analysis. Because if we find a feature or characteristic that would make us part of a single region or a unique or specific characteristic that everyone in the region would comply with it. But as Pablo said, very few institutions answered, and they do not represent the whole region, not even the sub-region. So imagine the whole region. So, but we wanted the second opportunity or the second phase. We would like to have something, like what you mentioned. It would be great to characterize the whole zone of the continent. Is there any other question? Yeah, please, Emiliano. Thank you very much. Sorry for interrupting the logic of the online questions. But besides that, I believe that it was a very interesting topic. Besides that, we have to acknowledge that it's a tool that is going to be very useful for the members. My complete admiration and pride. Um, and following up the conversation that we have by Professor Krishna, I'm following up with our conversation. I would like to ask about the inclusion of the relevant dimensions of inequity for the access of social security and all the services that may social security include. I am convinced that I believe that today there is an obligation with intersectionality and acknowledge these uh, limitations to having access to the social security. So we have to acknowledge that which are the inequity uh, and conditions, and to be aware of, I would ask a little bit thinking of having a very impressive work. I know this is only the beginning, the starting point. So Professor Pablo was asking, we think what you would recommend for the future, or for those that are going to continuously working with the CISS. What would your recommendation be to include these dimensions, talking about specific populations, to acknowledge intersectionalities, and how would you be able to include these specific indicators, maybe considering as a parameter the populations that the observatory considers. And if you believe, I don't know, maybe being more realistic, if you believe this can generate circles of virtue, if the institutions don't have these indicators and they do not break down populations, maybe if CISS continues asking, they will start doing it. So how would we be able enhance questionnaires that are sent to the institutions that would nourish the SHIS, and how we would be able to see these dimensions in the questionnaire so that maybe we would be able to motivate institutional changes in this kind of exercise. Thank you very much for your question. I think it's pretty good because it's a future in the end of the initiative. I would answer by beginning with something that I still have questions with, which is, you know, a dilemma for greater participation from the institutions. So, if you ask a lot, there might be participation from very few institutions. If you ask little questions, maybe there will be more institutions participating, but not so many, not so much information. So we have a little debate on how long the questionnaire should be. Well, we wanna first we say, well, we wanna ask a lot, so let's ask less, so that there would be a greater participation. And then now, giving you an answer to this, I think it is important to continue asking this because it may provoke institutions to really be interested in this. Uh, so we want to know if all the countries are doing it. So maybe I believe also that as from CIS, we could also have some recommendations to the members, you know, by telling, well, this kind of information is not the amount of recipes that are being, very few of them answer this, despite many of them were answering that question. So it may happen with certain populations, and then we can have some specific recommendations, strategic, for future exercise, and maybe support the way this information is being gathered. Maybe if CIS would be able to help us in Latin America, that would be great, a great effort. And finally, there was an idea that is still there, which in the end, this is very quantitative information because in the end, it's data supporting. In Belize, they wanted to know a lot about some innovating cases or innovative cases of good practices. Well, let's say good practices on certain topics. What is IMSS doing about elderly people? What is it about? To have some cases of study so that they would help some other institutions. What kind of information is being generated, so on and so forth. Also, maybe El Salvador was one of the few institutions answering about indigenous peoples. So, to try to understand how they gather all this information and maybe have this analysis, and um, it would be something that we would be able to apply in the future. So I will end with the last question, but I want to read it. Maybe if Dr. Elda may answer. And Luis Gomez says, congratulations for the SEAS initiative in question on the great difference between the registry of economic eh, units in comparison to the patterns registry in Mexico. I don't know the difference between this. I don't know if Dr. Elda may have a comment. We would
Lo que
love to
entiendo
listen to her. What I
comentar Luis
understand,
Gómez,
what they want to know
que
is
el Instituto Nacional de
the
Estadística y Geografía aquí en
INEGI
México levanta cada
in
5 años el
Mexico
censo económico.
gathers these economic censuses on every 5 years. So we have this data of the economic units. If I'm not wrong, we were gathering this census this year, but last year we were like 6 millions, more or less, 6 or 7 millions economic units registered by these censuses. And this compared to the million patterns that we have in the Social Security, that would the difference in figures that is referred to by our colleague. Because one thing is the administrative registry, and another thing, different one is a census. But I'll give the floor to Dr.
Gracias, con mucho gusto.
Elda. Sorry.
Bueno, es que
Well,
debemos
yeah.
tomar en
Well,
cuenta
we have to
que
consider
existen
that there are
microempresarios,
micro
los
entrepreneurs or
microempresarios
micro businessmen.
no
And
necesariamente
micro
tienen
businessmen do not
trabajadores,
necessarily have
entonces no
employees.
necesariamente son
So they do not
patrones.
necessarily
Por
are
eso es
business
que
owners or
hay,
employers.
hay una
So in
diferencia,
there we have a
doctor,
difference,
porque puede haber
to begin with, because
microempresarios
there might be micro
que no cuentan
businessmen
con ningún
that do
trabajador al
not
que
have
tengan que
any
registrar.
worker to be
Ellos son su
registered.
mismo,
So they are
su
their
mismo
own
patrón. Entonces, eh, al haber esa
employer.
diferencia,
So
una
when we have
cosa
this
es que
difference,
existan
there might
empresas
be the
y otra
existence of
cosa es que
companies
todas
or
las empresas
entrepreneurs
tengan
or
trabajadores. No
enterprises,
todas
and
las
a different one
empresas
is that all companies
tienen
have workers.
trabajadores,
Not all
empleados,
companies have
subordinados, a los
um,
cuales tendrán que
employees.
tener una relación
That
laboral
they would
y
have
que
to
tienen
have a
que
work
registrarse, ¿no?
relationship, and
Como
they would have to
patrones.
register
Entonces
as
ahí hay
employers.
una
So
diferencia
there we
entre
have
los patrones
difference
que los
between
institutos de seguridad social
employers
tienen
that the social
y lo
institutions of
que son
security,
los
social security have,
microempresarios.
and
Recordemos que
micro
los censos
um,
económicos pues
businessmen. And
van
remember that
más
economic
vinculados
census
hacia cuántas
are linked
empresas
to
existen,
how many
no que
companies there
todas
are,
sean
and not that all of them are,
patrones.
employers.
Espero haber contestado la duda.
I hope I have been able to answer your question. Well, I learned something else, something new now. And there's a final comment by Maria Antonieta, which finds it pretty good to talk about this. Now we'll give the floor to Vanessa, and then thank you for your participation. And I will invite you to participate in any kind of feedback is welcome always. And tell us if you find all the information that you want, if there is some mistakes or errors that you may see. We would like to have your participation. We would like to know if you are part of an institution and you would like to have further details, whatever you would like to have information about. So thank you very much, and please, Vanessa. Well, thank you very much again to all of those that were with us during this day, you know, this 2 hour meeting of the 46th permanent seminar on Social Security in the Americas. Well, before that, let me tell you which is 2 hour seminars that we have kept our audience, our public, and so that's pretty good. Nobody left. So I think they were all interested about this. So thank you very much, Pablo. So before closing, thank you very much to the technical team behind the scenes, the event area, you know, and of course, the whole team that is with us everywhere, the general secretary, and all of the people that helped us today from the area of events in finance administration, and of course, the colleagues that were with us, Krishna, Dr. Elda, and Francis. Thank you very much for being here with us in this process. And you're still here because you are here in the mm, work tables. And as Pablo said, if you want to participate in
these tables, please let us know. You cannot all participate, but if you really wish, welcome, welcome. Thank you very much for those that are here. Thank you for those that are online with us. We invite you to follow us in social media and our internet webpage. Uh, Document by Pablo is not there in the CISS webpage, but it will be in the integrated portal of data. Thank you very much, everyone. I don't know. Well, thank you very much. We'll see next time. Uh, May you have a great afternoon.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.